What's happening, Wargamers? Welcome to another Aegis Brand Studios video where we talk about a most recent character reveal. And today we are dealing with the second half of the Inhumans reveal of Black Bolt and Maximus the Mad. And today is going to be King Black Bolt of the Inhumans. So King Black Bolt, this is the second Black Bolt we're getting in the game right here. He's replacing, well, not replacing, but he is an alternative to the Black Bolt leader that we have at 5 threat. This guy's a little bit beefier at 6 threat. So does his toolkit warrant that extra threat? Is it worth losing that leadership, which is, you know, for all intents and purposes, a very strong, very good leadership? So we're going to take a quick look at the character, kind of give our sort of honest first impressions here. So off the hop, his defensive stats, 4s across the board. For a 6 threat, we've seen that a bunch of times. I don't think that's anything that we need to be surprised about. It's solid defensive stat lines there. No real weaknesses in that particular regard. He's throwing a good chunk of dice. He's got 7 stamina on his healthy side, 8 stamina on his injured side, so that's cumulative 15. That is a lot of stamina to chew through. I think it's the same on regular Black Bolt, because I want to say he was 6 and 9. So very, very hard to chew through in this particular case. 6th threat though, so he does go up that threat, and we're gonna have to find out whether or not that increase in threat is worth the loss of the leadership, and maybe the whisper and the bodyguard and everything like that. He is size 2 and he's a medium mover. Again, no surprises there. He does appear to be on a medium-sized base though, if I'm looking at the picture correctly here. So that medium move is going to get him a little bit more utility as we go through the game. So what does he bring for an attack suite? Well, he's got an energy attack, Sonic Blast, a beam 4, 5 dice, 0 power. It is a gainer attack, as beams usually should be, with a wild push restricted to size 3, pushing a character away short. I think this is actually a really cool attack. We've seen how strong beams, especially beam 4s, can be. Dynamo has dominated E-shapes for a long time. Gladiators look like he's about to really do some good work with E-shapes as well. So having this as just his standard attack, really solid, being able to displace multiple characters. Black Bolt might be a legitimate threat on the E-shapes because of this. Now, of course, 5 dice, getting that wild, it's not guaranteed. So, I mean, don't always go fishing for it, but you do have some reroll mechanics to try and bolster those odds there. Next up, we got a physical attack, Wrath of the Midnight King. Range 3, 8 dice for 4 power. After the attack's resolved, Black Bolt gets to advance medium. These sort of like nested movement abilities are always really cool because it does allow you to maybe make an extra attack where otherwise you would have to move. So it just gives you that board presence, that board control, which is really nice. And then it's got a wild throw trigger where it is a size agnostic throw, but it throws away short. Again, we're seeing this sort of throw become very common on the spender attacks. Character throws are starting to be more and more common for attack triggers as opposed to superpowers. At 8 dice, you got a pretty decent chance of getting that wild trigger on there and the medium advance. Overall, I like the attack. I think it's perfectly finely costed in this particular instance because you're getting that movement, you're getting the chance of the throw, and you're throwing 8 dice. Next up, we have an active ability. It's increase the volume for 3 power. During the next attack action, you add 2 dice to the attack roll. So now this is the attack action. So if I'm reading this correctly, I believe that might impact Sonic Blast. I'm going to have to look that one up there. But being able to just increase the amount of dice that you're throwing for 3 power, very powerful, especially when you can leverage it. It's not once per turn either. So if you have the power to do it, you could do it twice. Really toss down a whole bunch of dice there. Especially if you're on top of hammers or something like that. So really kind of cool. I like it. We have a hit and run for 2 power. We know what this does. It's an action. You make an attack, then you do your move action. Once per turn. Standard. I like it. Again, gives them a lot of mobility on that medium-sized base. We have Telepathy Command for 2. Choose another allied character within 4. That character advances. So it's an allied bow. Again, I mean, anytime you can move your characters out of sequence, out of activation, really good. That's why abilities like Royal Decree or Siblings in Arms are always really powerful. Tactics cards that move your characters, really powerful. So Bolt being able to do this for 2 power, really good. It helps get his team into position and can really do some good stuff. And then we have a bunch of, it's actually pretty much a bunch of innate powers at this point. We have Inhuman, so that's the standard attack and defense die reroll. We have Anti-Graviton control. When this character would suffer damage, reduce it by 1 to a minimum of 1. And additionally, he gains an additional power in the power phase. So he's got some good power generation in that particular regard. Having that damage reduction just makes that stamina a lot harder to get through, especially when paired with the force across the board for defenses. So he is a tanky lad, and he's going to be hard to take down in that particular regard. He's also the Inhuman King. At the start of the activation phase, you may choose one allied character with the Inhuman superpower. The chosen character removes 1 special condition. So this is at the start of the activation phase. So it doesn't require an activated character or anything like that. It's just at the start of the activated phase. It's almost like a little mini leadership built into it, which very powerful in that regard, being able to get rid of conditions, because it means you can basically shake off some staggers or get rid of any sort of other problematic condition that might impact your team. Then he's got Flight and Immunity Poison. So it's a very solid suite of abilities. Aside from his stamina, it doesn't look like anything changes on his injured side. So what does he lose in here? Well, obviously he loses the big Whisper on his other card. He loses the his Master Punch, which has always been a really cool punch, being able to like place him, throw characters, and throw a good chunk of dice. He loses his Bodyguard, which that one kind of stings a little bit. I like Black Bolt's Bodyguard. I think that was always really kind of cool. But overall, he does bring he brings a kit that kind of operates a little bit more independently of the rest of the team, which I think is really good. And I think he's throwing some good dice. Now, the interesting thing is I don't quite think he's throwing the dice that a lot of other 6 threats we've seen recently are throwing. It doesn't feel like he has that same damage output. So some of those other characters, perhaps they're outliers in this regard, or they just wanted to tone King Black Bolt down due to, maybe some synergies within his affiliation. But he feels like a more durable 6. He doesn't feel like the 6 that's going to be tossing a lot of damage, relatively speaking, out in comparison to the other 6 threats in the game. Does it make him bad? No. I think King Black Bolt actually looks like a fine character. I think the Inhuman players will be happy with him, especially if they want to play around with other leaderships offered by Maximus the Mad, or even the leadership card that Medusa will now have access to. And then he does have a card here, Genetic Prophecy. It's Inhuman's reactive. During the power phase, if you have at least 2 fewer VPs than your opponent, an allied Blackagar Bolt again, so this can be any Black Bolt character, may play this card. You gain 2 VPs this round, but the character cannot make attacks. This one's a really interesting one because it's a cool little catch-up mechanic, but you're sacrificing a lot of potential damage output on these characters. There's obviously going to be times when you want to run it, times when you don't. If there's a chance that you need the damage output provided by a Black Bolt, you probably don't want to run this one. But if you don't have priority and Black Bolt is probably about to take a bit of a nap, you can play this card and get those 2 victory points, and maybe he goes down anyway, maybe he doesn't. But it's a really interesting card. I kind of like it, especially when you pair it with Terrigenesis, I believe, which gives the Inhumans an extra way of getting VPs out of the normal sequence of events. So I think it's a really kind of cool card to bring in tandem with everything else there, and create some interesting puzzles for your opponent to go with. So does Black Bolt work anywhere outside of the Inhumans? That one's hard to say. He doesn't necessarily look power-starved. A beam 4 can really generate a lot of power really quickly on a gainer if you can line up 2 or 3 targets, which on E-shaped maps, that's really easy to do. He's getting that extra power every power phase anyway, so him having 4 or 5 power available to him doesn't really seem outside the realm of possibility. Obviously, if he gets stunned, that's really going to slow him down. He's not going to like that in some cases. But he does have an expensive kit. If you want to use all his superpowers right off the hop, that's 7 power, which doesn't give you anything left over for his spender either. So you are going to have to look into his kit and decide what it is you want to be doing with it. I think, generally speaking, his play pattern will probably be a lot of Sonic Blast, moving characters around, possibly boosting his own stuff and increase the volume. I think that's what he's going to be. He can make for a very solid turret. Even a spender at range 3 just makes it so he can not necessarily have to engage too much into the fight, and he can still impact stuff. So yeah, there we go. That is King Black Bolt. I want to hear below in the comments what you think about King Black Bolt. If you think the 6th threat is worth the extra threat, the loss of some of the abilities, the loss of leadership. I think he's very interesting. I want to try him out on the table as soon as I can get my hands on him, and I want to hear what the community has to think about him. So sound off below, and we'll see you next time. Happy wargaming.